A quiet suburban neighborhood in the United States, where the houses looked almost the same, with their neatly trimmed lawns and American flags swaying in the evening breeze, lived a man everyone admired for his discipline. He was a military veteran, a man of order and respect, someone who had lived his entire life by rules, routines, and responsibilities. To the outside world, he was strong, reliable, and firm, a father figure who demanded excellence not only from himself, but from everyone around him. But inside his home, this strictness often created walls between him and the people who loved him most, especially his 12-year-old daughter, Emma. Emma was a quiet, sensitive girl who loved painting, writing stories, and collecting little moments of joy. She was the kind of child who noticed the small things, the sound of birds outside her window, the way raindrops danced on the glass, the comfort of a warm blanket on a cold night. All she ever wanted was for her father to notice her the same way, to see her not as someone who had to be perfect or disciplined all the time, but as his little girl who just needed love. One chilly autumn evening, Emma came home from school carrying her art project tightly in her arms. It was a painting she had poured her heart into, a picture of a family holding hands beneath a golden sun. She had carefully drawn herself, her mom, and her dad, with smiling faces, standing together in warmth and love. To Emma, it wasn't just a painting. It was her silent message to her father. "This is all I want. Togetherness, your love." She walked into the living room where her father sat in his usual place, the recliner by the window. He had his glasses perched low on his nose, a newspaper in one hand, and the evening news playing softly on the television. His posture was upright, his face serious, as though the weight of the world still rested on his shoulders, even though he was no longer in uniform. "Dad," Emma's voice was soft, almost trembling, as she held out her painting. "Look what I made at school today." Her father glanced up briefly, his eyes flickering toward the paper in her hands. "That's nice, Emma," he said in a flat tone, before lowering his gaze back to the newspaper. Emma's smile faded. She had hoped, just for a moment, that he would put the paper down, really look at her artwork, and maybe tell her how proud he was. She didn't want a big celebration, just a hug, or even a warm smile. But instead, she stood there in silence, feeling invisible in her own home. After a few moments, she whispered, "Okay," and walked back to her room, clutching the painting tightly to her chest. Later that night, as Emma lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling with tears in her eyes. Her heart was heavy, not because her father was unkind, but because he never realized how much his coldness hurt. She didn't want toys, she didn't need money, she didn't even care about grades as much as her dad thought she did. Deep down, all she wanted was something so simple, a hug, just one hug to remind her that she was still his little girl. That night, in the quiet of her room, Emma whispered to herself, "Why doesn't he see me? Why doesn't he just hold me?" And as the wind rustled through the trees outside, her little heart longed for the one thing she had never dared to ask for out loud: her father's embrace. The next morning, the house was alive with its usual rhythm. The smell of fresh coffee drifted from the kitchen. The faint sound of the radio played news updates, and Emma sat at the dining table with her cereal bowl, quietly stirring the milk without eating. Her father, dressed neatly in his pressed shirt and polished shoes, moved with his usual precision, his tie knotted perfectly, his watch strapped tight on his wrist, his briefcase already waiting by the door. He looked at Emma, who was lost in thought, her spoon circling endlessly in the bowl. "Emma," he said, his voice firm, "eat your breakfast properly. You'll be late for school." Emma quickly nodded, forcing a bite of cereal into her mouth even though she wasn't hungry. She never argued with him, never talked back, because she knew that in her father's world, rules were everything. To him, discipline was love. But to Emma, it felt like distance. She wished, just once, instead of reminding her about being on time, he would ask her how she was feeling, or if she had slept well, or even notice that she looked sad. Her mother, watching quietly from the sink, noticed Emma's drooping eyes. She had seen this unspoken tension for years, the father's strictness clashing with the daughter's fragile heart. "She's just tired, dear," her mother said gently, hoping to soften the moment. But her father only adjusted his watch and replied, "She needs to learn consistency. Life won't wait for her." Emma swallowed hard, her little hands tightening around the spoon. Life wouldn't wait. But what about her childhood? What about the moments she desperately wanted to spend with her dad, without feeling like she was being judged? She looked at him, Her eyes filled with a longing he never seemed to notice, and whispered under her breath, "I just need you, Dad." On the way to school, Emma sat quietly in the back seat of the car, her backpack hugged tightly against her chest. The roads were lined with colorful autumn leaves, kids with jackets and scarves walking with their parents, laughter echoing in the cool air. She watched through the window as other dads bent down to tie their children's shoes or carry their heavy backpacks. She saw them bend low, smile, and kiss their kids on the forehead before letting them go. A small ache grew in her chest. When the car stopped in front of the school, her father glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Work hard today," he said simply. His voice was steady, firm, almost like a command. Emma wanted to say something back, something bold like, "Dad, I don't just want to work hard. I want you to hug me." But the words stayed trapped inside her. Instead, she forced a small smile and said, "Okay, Dad." She opened the car door, her little shoes crunching on the fallen leaves, and walked toward the building with her head low. Her father watched her go. To him, everything seemed fine. She was polite, obedient, never causing trouble. But what he couldn't see was the way her heart sank with every step, the way she wished, more than anything, that he would call her back just once, open his arms, and say the words she needed most, "I love you." That morning, Emma carried more than her school books inside her backpack. She carried the silent weight of a hug that had never been given. At school, Emma tried to blend in with the chatter and laughter of her classmates, but her silence made her stand out. During recess, while other kids ran across the playground, tossing footballs and chasing each other, Emma sat on a wooden bench under the tall oak tree, clutching her lunchbox. She opened it slowly, seeing the neatly cut sandwich her mom had prepared, but her appetite was nowhere to be found. Her best friend Lily came bounding over with her messy ponytail and a wide grin. "Emma, come on, let's play," she said, tugging at her sleeve. Emma smiled faintly and shook her head. "I'm not in the mood." Lily plopped down next to her, her sneakers swinging back and forth. "You've been quiet a lot lately. Is something wrong?" Emma hesitated. She wanted to talk, to let the storm inside her out, but where would she even begin? Finally, she whispered, "Do you ever wish your dad hugged you more?" Lily blinked. "My dad? He hugs me all the time. This morning he kissed my forehead and said he was proud of me for finishing my project." She smiled at the memory, then stopped when she noticed Emma's face. "Doesn't your dad do that?" Emma lowered her gaze, her small fingers tightening around the sandwich. "No, he's always busy. He reminds me to study, tells me to behave," but her voice cracked slightly. "He never really hugs me." Lily's smile faded. She reached over and put a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Maybe he just doesn't know how to show it. My mom says some dads are like that, but deep down, they still love us." Emma nodded slowly, but her chest ached. She wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe her father's love was there, hidden somewhere behind his rules and his stern face. But every day, it felt harder to hold on to that hope. Later, during art class, the teacher asked the children to draw their families. Crayons scattered across the desks. Little hands moved quickly over paper, filling it with houses, stick figures, smiling faces, and hearts. Emma sat frozen for a moment, then picked up a blue crayon and began to draw. Her drawing showed her mom smiling, her little brother holding a toy, and her dad standing tall with his arms crossed. Next to her own small figure, she drew something different, a bubble around herself, separating her from the rest of the family. And right above her head, she scribbled a thought cloud. "I just want a hug." When the teacher walked by, she glanced at Emma's paper and paused, her heart twisting. She knelt down and asked softly, "Emma, is everything okay at home?" Emma quickly covered the paper with her hand and forced a smile. "I'm fine, Miss Carter. Just drawing." But as the bell rang and the children packed their bags, Miss Carter couldn't shake the image of that small thought bubble. She knew Emma was carrying something heavier than a backpack, something even a teacher's kind words couldn't fix. As Emma walked home later that day, the autumn wind blowing through her hair, her heart carried the same quiet prayer. Maybe today, maybe just once, Dad will see me, not as a student, not as someone he needs to discipline, but as his little girl who only wants his hug. That evening, the house was quiet, except for the sound of forks clinking against plates. The family sat around the dinner table. Emma, her mom, her little brother, and her father, Mr. Harris. He was a tall man with a strong presence, his uniform shirt still on from work, his tie loosened, but his posture stiff as always. "Emma, how was school?" her mom asked gently, passing her a bowl of mashed potatoes. Emma hesitated, pushing peas around her plate. "It was fine." Her father looked up sharply. "Just fine? Did you pay attention in class? Did you finish your homework?" His voice wasn't harsh, but it carried a weight that made Emma's stomach twist. "Yes, sir," she said softly, her eyes on her plate. Mr. Harris nodded satisfied, and took another bite of his steak. He thought he was teaching his daughter discipline, responsibility, the values he believed would make her strong in the real world. But what he didn't see was how small Emma felt at that table, how the words "sir" came out of her mouth not with respect, but with fear of disappointing him. Her little brother Jacob chattered about his day, how he scored a goal in recess soccer, and how his teacher gave him a gold star. Their mom smiled warmly, encouraging him to share every detail. Emma listened quietly, her fork barely moving. Halfway through dinner, she gathered the courage to speak. "Dad, today in art class we had to draw our families." She paused, searching his face for even a flicker of interest. "And?" he asked, his voice even, his eyes fixed on her like he was evaluating her performance. Emma swallowed. I drew us all together," she wanted to add, "and I drew myself, wishing for a hug," but the words caught in her throat. "That's good," Mr. Harris replied, nodding briskly. "Art is fine, but don't let it distract you from your real studies. Remember, math and science are what will matter when you grow up." The moment slipped away, the one chance she had to open her heart. She nodded quickly, hiding the sting behind a forced smile. Her mom noticed, though. She saw the way Emma's eyes dimmed, the way her little hands tightened into fists under the table. She cleared her throat gently, trying to shift the moment. "Honey, Emma's drawings are always so thoughtful. Maybe after dinner she can show us?" Mr. Harris shrugged, already reaching for his glass of water. "If it doesn't take too long, I have some work to finish tonight." The table grew silent again. Emma's appetite was gone, but she kept picking at her food because she knew her father would notice if she didn't. Inside, her heart whispered the same ache it had whispered for weeks. "Why can't you just look at me and see that I need you? Why can't you just hug me like other dads hug their daughters?" When dinner ended, Jacob ran off to play, and her mom began clearing plates. Emma lingered in her chair, staring at her father as he carried his laptop to the study. He paused at the doorway, glanced back once and said, "Emma, don't stay up too late. You've got school tomorrow." And then he was gone, the sound of the door clicking shut behind him, echoing louder than anything else in the house. Emma's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away. She didn't want to look weak, not even in front of herself. Instead, she whispered under her breath, "I don't need much, Dad. Just one hug, just once." But the house stayed quiet, and the hug she longed for never came. That night, Emma sat alone in her room, the soft glow of her nightstand lamp casting shadows across the walls. Her sketchbook lay open on her lap, pages filled with drawings of her family, some happy, some sad, all telling stories she couldn't bring herself to say out loud. On one page, she had drawn herself standing next to her father. He towered over her, straight-backed, his hands folded firmly at his sides. Beside him, little Emma had drawn herself with wide eyes, holding out her arms for a hug that never came. She stared at the sketch, tracing the lines with her fingertip, and whispered, "Why is it so hard for you to hold me, Dad?" Emma reached for a marker and wrote 3 small words in the corner of the page. "I need you." Then she quickly closed the sketchbook, afraid even the paper might betray her secret longing. Meanwhile, in the study downstairs, Mr. Harris sat hunched over his laptop. Spreadsheets filled the screen. Emails piled up in his inbox. To him, work was not just work, it was survival. It was his way of making sure his family never struggled the way he once had. He believed his strictness was love, that his discipline would protect his daughter from failure, from weakness. But what he didn't realize was that in building walls of toughness, he was also building distance. As the house grew quiet, Emma tiptoed into the hallway, her sketchbook pressed tightly against her chest. She wanted to show her mom, maybe even leave it on the kitchen table so her dad might see it by accident. But halfway down the stairs, she froze. She could hear the clicking of her father's keyboard, steady and unrelenting, like a barrier she couldn't cross. Her little heart sank, and she turned back, retreating to her room, like a soldier too scared to fight a battle. Instead, she pulled out a notebook and began to write. The words spilled out, shaky at first but growing stronger. "Dear Dad, I know you want me to be strong. I know you want me to do well in school and make you proud. But sometimes, I just need you to be soft with me. Sometimes, I just need a hug. I don't want gifts. I don't want anything big. I just want to feel like your little girl again." Her eyes blurred with tears as she finished. She folded the paper carefully and slid it into the back pocket of her sketchbook, as if hiding a treasure too fragile to be found. Then she curled up under her blanket, clutching the sketchbook to her chest like it was the hug she couldn't get from her father. Downstairs, Mr. Harris rubbed his tired eyes and leaned back in his chair. He thought about how quiet Emma had been at dinner, how her smile seemed forced, how she always answered him with "yes, sir," instead of just "yes, Dad." A strange heaviness tugged at his chest, but he shook it off, convincing himself he was doing the right thing. But deep inside, A small voice whispered, a voice he hadn't heard in years. Maybe she doesn't need another lecture. Maybe she just needs you. And for the first time in a long while, Mr. Harris closed his laptop a little earlier than usual. He didn't go to her room that night, but something inside him had shifted, even if just a little. The next morning started like any other. Mr. Harris with his black coffee, Emma rushing with her backpack, and Mrs. Harris trying to hold the balance between them. But unlike every other morning, something unexpected happened. As Emma hurried to grab her jacket, her sketchbook slipped out of her bag and landed on the floor with a soft thud. She froze. The sketchbook lay wide open on a page. The one where she had drawn herself reaching for her father, arms stretched for a hug, while he stood tall and stiff, hands tucked away, face unreadable. Emma panicked and bent down quickly to grab it. But before she could, Mr. Harris's hand reached it first. He picked it up slowly, his brows knitting together as his eyes landed on the drawing. The world seemed to pause. The sketch wasn't just lines and colors. It was a mirror reflecting everything he had been blind to. His daughter's longing, her silent plea, her loneliness. His throat tightened as he noticed the tiny words scribbled in the corner. I need you. For a moment he couldn't breathe. His soldier-like discipline, his walls of strictness, all cracked under the weight of a single sentence. He looked at Emma, who stood frozen, her small hands twisting nervously in front of her, her eyes filled with fear, not because she had done something wrong, but because she had let her heart slip into a place where he could see it. Emma, his voice broke, softer than she had ever heard it. She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. Is this how you feel? He asked, his hands trembling slightly as he held the sketchbook. Emma swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. I just want you to hug me sometimes. I don't care about grades or being perfect all the time. I just want you to be my dad. The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable. Mr. Harris felt his chest ache in a way he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. All those nights he thought discipline was love. All the times he mistook silence for strength came crashing down on him. Mrs. Harris, watching from the kitchen doorway, pressed a hand over her mouth, her own eyes brimming with tears. She had always known Emma needed this, but she never thought her husband would actually see it for himself. Mr. Harris knelt down, the sketchbook still in his hands, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he truly saw his daughter, not as a student, not as a reflection of his discipline, but as a little girl who only wanted her father's embrace. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. And though he didn't hug her just yet, something inside him broke open. A seed of realization had been planted, and it was growing fast. Emma quickly grabbed the sketchbook from his hands, hugging it tightly to her chest, as if protecting her secret again. But little did she know, her father's heart was no longer the same. That morning, as Emma left for school, Mr. Harris stood by the doorway longer than usual, watching her small figure walk down the street. And deep inside, he whispered a promise to himself. I need to change before it's too late. The morning after the sketchbook incident, the Harris household felt different. The air was still, but underneath that stillness was something new, something Emma couldn't quite put into words. She came down the stairs, expecting to see the same old scene. Her dad buried behind the newspaper, coffee steaming beside him, face unreadable. But instead, she froze in her tracks. On the kitchen counter sat a plate of scrambled eggs, a glass of orange juice, and a sticky note with a clumsy drawing of a smiley face. Next to it, in her father's sharp handwriting, were the words, "Have a great day, Emma. Love, Dad." Emma blinked. For a second, she thought it must have been her mom, but then she noticed her mom was still upstairs getting ready for work. Slowly, she turned toward her father, who was sitting at the table, clearly pretending to read the newspaper but sneaking quick glances at her reaction. Her heart raced. This had never happened before. Mr. Harris wasn't the type to leave notes or make breakfast. He was the type to remind her about spelling quizzes, posture at the dinner table, or being 10 minutes early, not just on time. Yet here was something so small, so ordinary, but to Emma it felt like the biggest gift in the world. She picked up the note and smiled without even realizing it. "Did you make this?" she asked softly, her voice half full of disbelief and half full of hope. Mr. Harris cleared his throat, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "It's just eggs," he muttered, keeping his eyes on the paper, but his ears were red, betraying the emotions he was trying so hard to hide. Emma sat down, holding the note like it was treasure. "I like it," she whispered. For the first time in what felt like forever, the silence between them wasn't heavy or suffocating. It was warm. It wasn't perfect, but it was different, and different was enough to make Emma's heart beat with a kind of cautious happiness. As she ate, she kept sneaking glances at her dad. He didn't smile, Not fully, but his eyes softened each time he looked at her. And in that softness, Emma saw something she had been missing for years, her father trying. When she left for school, she slipped the note into her backpack, right between the pages of her sketchbook. She knew she'd read it again later, just to remind herself that maybe, just maybe, things were changing. And as the door closed behind her, Mr. Harris sat at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. For years, he had built walls made of rules and discipline, believing they were enough. But one tiny sticky note and a plate of scrambled eggs had taught him something he had never admitted before. His daughter didn't need a perfect father, she just needed him. That day, both father and daughter carried a quiet hope in their hearts. Maybe love could be built one small step at a time. That night, Emily lay in her room, curled up under the blanket, staring at the ceiling as the dim moonlight slipped through the curtains. Her mind replayed every harsh word her father had spoken over the years, every time he walked away when she needed comfort, and every moment he chose silence instead of warmth. She pressed her face into her pillow, wishing just once she could feel safe in his arms, but even wishing for that felt impossible now. Downstairs, Richard sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was quiet. Too quiet. In front of him was a half-finished glass of water, but he wasn't thirsty. His eyes wandered to the wall where family pictures hung. One in particular caught his attention. A photo of Emily when she was 5, wearing a bright pink dress, holding his hand with both of her tiny ones, grinning as if he was her entire world. Richard's chest tightened. He hadn't noticed it before, but in that picture, her smile was so pure, so full of trust. He whispered to himself, almost afraid of the truth. When did I stop being her safe place? When did I stop holding her like that? His voice cracked, echoing softly in the empty kitchen. He thought about all the times Emily had come home excited with little drawings, or when she nervously tried to talk about school, and how he had brushed her off, too busy, too strict, too focused on shaping her into someone strong. In his mind, he had believed discipline would prepare her for the world. But now, staring at that photo, he realized what he had really done. He had pushed her away. Upstairs, Emily wiped away a tear, whispering to herself, "Why can't he just love me the way I am?" Her heart ached, but deep down, she still longed for him. Despite everything, he was her dad. She wanted his approval, his presence, his embrace. That night, father and daughter both lay awake in different rooms, yet thinking of the same thing, each other. For the first time, Richard's heart began to shift. He didn't know how to fix the distance, but he knew one thing with certainty. Emily didn't just need his rules, she needed his love. The next evening, Richard stood outside Emily's bedroom door, his hand hovering uncertainly in the air. For years, he had always walked past her room without stopping, convinced that keeping his distance was the right way to raise her. But tonight, something was different. His chest felt heavy, his throat tight, and for the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure what to say or how to say it. He just knew he couldn't keep walking away. Inside, Emily was sitting cross-legged on her bed, headphones in her ears, pretending to be busy with homework. But in truth, her heart carried the same emptiness it had carried for years. She longed for her dad to notice her, to care for her, to simply knock and ask, "Are you okay?" But that knock never came, until now. Richard finally exhaled and tapped lightly on the door. The sound startled Emily. She froze, pulling off her headphones, her eyes widening in disbelief. Her dad never knocked on her door. For a moment, she thought she imagined it, but then she heard his voice, softer than she had ever heard it before. "Emily, can I come in?" Her chest tightened, her mind racing with questions. Why was he here? Was she in trouble again? Or was this something else? She hesitated, her voice trembling. "Yeah, come in." Richard slowly pushed the door open. His tall frame filled the doorway, but for once, he didn't look stern or intimidating. He looked vulnerable. His eyes flickered to the floor before meeting hers. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Emily felt her heart beating fast, her walls trying to rise back up, but something in his face stopped her. Richard finally stepped inside and sat on the edge of her bed. He didn't lecture, he didn't ask about homework, he didn't comment on her messy room. Instead, he looked at her with tired eyes and whispered, "I think I've been too hard on you." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say. A part of her wanted to cry, another part wanted to stay guarded, but in that small moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Richard hesitated, then reached out, as if testing the waters, his hand slowly resting over hers. It wasn't a hug, not yet, but it was the first crack in the wall between them. And for Emily, it meant more than words could ever explain. Richard sat there on the edge of Emily's bed, his hand trembling slightly as it rested on hers. For years, he had been the unshakable, unbending figure of authority in her life, a man of rules, discipline, and expectations. But in that moment, he wasn't a strict father. He was just a man who was afraid he had lost his daughter's love. Emily's eyes glistened as she stared at him. This wasn't the dad she was used to seeing. His voice didn't sound sharp or commanding anymore. It was raw, broken, and human. She whispered, almost afraid to believe it, "Dad, I just wanted you." Those words shattered Richard's heart. He realized she never hated him, never resented him the way he had feared. All she ever needed was the one thing he withheld, his affection. Not perfect grades, not flawless behavior, not achievements, just him. Without another thought, Richard pulled Emily into his arms. At first, she stiffened, the shock of feeling his embrace after so many years almost too much to process. But then, slowly, she melted against him, burying her face in his chest as the tears she had been holding back for years finally poured out. Richard held her tighter, his own eyes wet. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about discipline or control. He was thinking about love, pure, unconditional, fatherly love. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he whispered into her hair. "I should have been here for you, always." Emily's sobs softened into quiet breaths as she whispered back, "I just needed this, Dad, just you." The room was silent, except for the sound of their hearts finally beating in rhythm again. Father and daughter united not by strictness, but by something much stronger. Love, forgiveness, and a hug that spoke louder than words ever could. That night, Richard realized he hadn't lost time completely. He still had the chance to be the father Emily deserved. And for Emily, that one hug healed years of unspoken hurt. Moral of the story: sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give isn't money, advice, or strict rules. It's simply love. A hug, a gentle word, or showing up with warmth can heal wounds that discipline never could. Children don't remember the rules as much as they remember how deeply they were loved. A father's strength is not only in guiding his children firmly, but in embracing them with tenderness.